a lost soul, a broken man, and a goddamn rat. These are the three components that carry the legacy of a legendary war in Shareverse. This is the Skypenet War. Technically speaking, this storyline is a continuation of the Universal Disaster series. So, if you want context of how and why a zombified rat from Wayside is running Skynet, well, watch that. But for those who are caught up with Universal Disaster lore, let's jump right into what Sammy had been up to following 2010. Sammy was released from Hell's Prison in 2014. By that point, the Terminator series was in an absolute limbo, what with the rights to the franchise up for auction multiple times. However, he sought to update his company's image and try to stay out of trouble, at least for now. He did have a couple of plans he was eager to get to while serving his sentence, with his most major accomplishment creating a personal assistant that was also the embodiment of Skynet, the T-5000, who Sammy nicknamed as Alex. Other than this major addition, Sammy was silent throughout the year, but that would soon change. In the dead of night on one mid-June day, Skynet's security system was overridden, causing Sammy to be attacked and targeted by his own creations. Alex did resist this hack, and the two of them made a quick escape. They were on the run by a force they knew nothing of. Their only source of comfort just so happens to be a place Sammy once tried to destroy, Universal Orlando. The entertainment manager of the Viacom alignment, Carmilla, was quickly alerted about their arrival and invited them to stay at her house. She too was unsure who could hijack such a militaristic company within a matter of minutes. Well, enough serious drama, as my self-OC was flipping out over freshman year regents the next morning. And, I don't mean to brag, I never went to summer school because my regent grades were just barely good enough. However, as he was walking back home, he was alerted by the thousands and hundreds of robot skeletons blocking his way. Carmilla and Sammy were also alerted to this, and the three of them began to destroy many of Sammy's creations. But that's when they encountered the mastermind behind this attack. So, to give you context, in 2015, there was a little old movie called Unfriended, and it's quite possibly the worst horror movie I've seen. The characters are unlikable pricks, even for unlikable pricks in horror movies. The writing is Zoe 101 levels of bad, and most importantly, the movie's not scary. I saw this in a packed theater, opening night, full of teenagers screaming their asses off to the most silliest deaths possible, like some guy jamming his hand into a blender. Ooh, so scary. It is absolutely ridiculous that this is the state of horror movies. I hated this film so much that I let everyone online know how I felt about this movie. However, in Shareverse, this was pretty much a death sentence. What AJ didn't know was that the events of the movie was based off organic astral soul incidents, and therefore, the ghost killer, Laura Burns, was still lingering on Earth and the internet. When she heard this review in particular, she had yet another person to go after. And because Unfriended was distributed by Universal, that meant she had access to the most dangerous robotics within the alignment. Using her ghost cybernetic hacking skills, she hijacked all of Skynet and evicted Sammy, all to get back about some person who said mean things about the movie adaptation of her murders. Get over it. It seemed that the endless wave of T-800 models were getting to kill the three. But then heroes from all 6 alignments came to their aid. Edward and his group came from the Coral alignment, the co-owner of the Disney alignment brought her digital monster brethren alongside her, allies from the Great War, Viacom, Warner, and Subcoral all showed up. Everybody did what they had to do, and with a large surplus of people, Laura had to retreat. On that night, all 6 alignments in Shareverse formed a pact to defeat Laura, get Sammy his company back, and prevent a Judgment Day from happening. This would be the declaration of a war that would later be titled Skypenet, due to Laura's skills hacking into Skype. And yes, the name sounds really tacky, but hey, if this storyline came out before or after 2015, it would most definitely be called UvuNet or ZoomNet. So be happy with what we got. What makes the Skypenet War so unique was how different it is. Everybody stopped what they were doing at the time and all decided to chip in to save the world. Neo Disney and original Disney both agreed to set aside their differences for the time to face a much larger threat. Rivalries cooled down temporarily. Everybody did what they had to do in order to keep the future bright. Sammy realized Judgment Day could never happen if he was in charge, because if he did, everybody that was helping him out would kick his ass in no time. The war was so efficient, it only lasted a few weeks. Not even. There were some hiccups, such as the case with Carmilla, who at the start of the war went into labor and gave birth to her son, Charles. Oh yeah, Simon married Carmilla. Cry about it. That meant more backup was needed every time Laura sent out a squad of Terminators to destroy the Alliance. But Carmilla would quickly recover post-birth and lowered the number of machines even further. Sammy had estimated that Laura was going to run out of resources and machines really soon, so it wouldn't be long that she would be defeated. However, unknown to him, Laura had been hiding her trump card under her non-tangible sleeve, and this change would be why the Skypenet War is so well known within Shareverse. So let's talk about why I think Terminator Genisys is the third best movie in the series.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
No, really, I stand by this claim. I think none of the characters were miscast. I actually understood what was happening with the alternate timelines, unlike some people. And I would have loved to see where this story would have gone if we had gotten that proper trilogy. Would have been so much better than getting just another movie that tried to replicate T2 for a newer generation. Genisys could have been the start of something new to a series that's been stuck in 1991. But no, boomers didn't like it because it was the same crap as before, even though it wasn't. The film had terrific and new ideas. One day, I will make that 40-minute defensive analysis on why this movie is actually good, and not as an April Fool's joke this time. But what does this have to do with the war? Well, isn't it obvious? On the eve of June 30th, Sammy had finished a private dinner all to himself in Manhattan, and he was going to have Alex drive him back to Carmilla's place. I'd like to imagine he drives around in a limo, and he sits in a booster seat. But Laura stopped him, but she was alone this time. Sammy told her that she was running out of forces, and by the following night, the war would be over. But Laura wasn't too fazed by this danger. Instead, she seemed confident she would win. What appeared behind her was a silver machine based on the human muscle system, Skynet's most powerful Terminator model, the T-3000, John Connor. Sammy was horrified to realize Laura got his hands on him. What makes the T-3000 so dangerous, especially back in 2015, was how advanced he was. Other infiltration units were strong, but also clunky and slow. Even their liquid alloy models were also like that at times. Connor's strength was above everything that came before him, but the speed. My god, the speed! He was able to move so fast, it was virtually impossible to land a good hit on him. He was able to destroy the T-5000 with ease, leaving Sammy battered and bruised. As the two were leaving, all of a sudden a reinforcement ship showed up to help Sammy. And then suddenly, that ship blew up. John's nanotech was so fast, he teleported onto the ship, killed everyone, and destroyed the engines. Laura was even more pissed that Sammy would attack her from her back. Laura then ordered John to perform his signature move, the corkscrew. While it looks silly of him spinning around midair, it unleashes a deadly barrage of spikes and other pieces of metals to the enemy's entire body. Laura ordered not to kill Sammy, as she told him in 24 hours she will win this war and wipe out all of humanity, before leaving alongside her personal servant. When more reinforcements showed up to the carnage immediately after Laura had left, Sammy frantically warned everybody about the dangers that Laura was hiding. But that left everybody with so many questions. For example, how the hell did Sammy get his arch nemesis to become his ally? While Sammy was serving his sentence in Hell's Prison from 2010 to 2014, he had been brainstorming the idea to create a new model that combined his menacing robot attributes with humanistic traits. Once being revived, he returned to his base, built his personal assistant, and devised a plot to make his magnum opus. He was able to kidnap Connor and injected him with nanotechnology, as well as giving him an inhibitor chip to obey all of Skynet's orders. The few missions he was deployed for, the T-3000 was an unstoppable force, killing all threats and retrieving efficient machinery for Sammy. However, Sammy came to the realization that one day, John's inhibitor chip would be broken, and he could easily use his newfound powers to help the humans. Overnight, he deactivated and shut down the new subject, and not only sent him to an alternate timeline, but into the furthest depths of space. No man should have all this power. And that's where Laura comes in. After she took over Skynet, she noticed the time machine at the center of the building apparently had a history of when it was used, as well as the destination and the timeline for each usage. One location did seem really odd, a random timeline and an empty void of space. And that's how she retrieved John, frozen and deactivated, with his chip destroyed. When he came to, he felt betrayed that no one came after him to help. Much like how Sammy began to despise humanity for leaving him to rot, so too did John. With Laura at his side, the two were ultimately going to take their revenge on everyone and everything. But this wasn't the only revelation that was revealed that night. Meanwhile, Carmilla was tucking her child to bed. She had no doubt she could win this war and start enjoying her new maternal side. But while she was relaxing at her backyard porch, Laura had appeared to her, once again alone, and she called her by a name she had not heard for so long, Marcella Karnstein, Carmilla's original name. It turns out Laura was beyond your everyday high schooler astral soul that took her own life and became a killer ghost. After she was done killing her bullies in 2014, she was confused why her soul did not return to heaven. She was promised if she killed those who wronged her, she would be cleansed. And that's because she forgot one more person from her past life. Laura was a modern-day reincarnation of another woman by the name of Laura from the late 1800s. And Carmilla knew exactly who she was because it was the same Laura she tried to seduce and murder all those years ago. After Carmilla was slain in the 1800s, Laura never recovered from the trauma that she caused, and eventually she took her own life form. Centuries later, in the late 90s, she would be reincarnated with no memories of her past life. Only after her second death would she get a second chance of going to heaven. And when she found out she was reincarnated, she tried to look at where Carmilla was in the modern day, completely horrified to know she had been living the good life for a long time. A successful fighting game persona, the entertainment manager for an entire alignment, a nice house, a husband, and now a child. Laura found envy and wrath that her tormentor has been living in the lap of luxury, that she wanted to find a way to get revenge and finally go to heaven. And with Skynet on her side, that plan was possible, especially with the notion of the Viacom alignment destroying itself from the inside. The plan was total genius. That after tomorrow, she'll go after her family before killing Carmilla herself. And that leads us to the final day of the war, July 1st, 2015. The battle plans were set. The final battle would happen on Skynet's grounds. Everybody would surround the base and defeat Laura from there. Now for AJ, he was mortified to know that John, a former ally, was now an enemy. He asked both Sammy and Carmilla if he could fight him one-on-one. They said yes. For some reason. When the battle initiated, everybody went into position with Laura and the remaining hunter-killer and infiltration units front and center. But this is Laura. She has a plan for everything. Without warning, she erupted an EMP blast that shut down everyone's technology except hers. Everybody was struggling now with the disadvantage, but also, Sammy was nowhere to be seen. Over on AJ's end, he needed confirmation that John was a lost soul, and he will do anything to get his vengeance. As he respected his opinion, the two fought, and AJ naturally got his ass beat. Before John could unleash his corkscrew, he was stopped by the presence of Sammy, with a Staples shopping bag. He then threw the bag at Connor, revealing to be full of magnets. And by a miracle, he became immobilized, struggling to keep his nanotech afloat to his body.
What?
So, it turns out, Sammy programmed the T-3000 to have one weakness. A very, very dumb weakness.
Fucking magnets, how do they work?
AJ was dumbfounded by this reveal, but kind of relieved. Sammy pulls out a gun, a small one of course, and shoots John point blank in the face, finally terminating him. Gee, if we used this story, Dark Fate wouldn't be a thing. But the fun just started for Sammy, since it turns out his personalized mech, the T-1000, was already on him this whole time. And since he was away from the EMP blast, he was able to activate it in no time. With the arrival of Sammy, humanity got their second wind and pushed back against the machines. Carmilla confronted Laura one last time, and the two fought. With her skills in street fighting and her more powerful vampiric powers, completely dominated the fight. In the end, Laura was defeated. But really, Laura was the Soulflow Antonio of the war. Everybody was playing checkers, while she was playing 4D omnidimensional chess. Because even though she lost the war, she could always try again. When Sammy was building the Time Hole in the late 2000s, he first tested a prototype before scrapping it and making the one that we see in Universal Disaster. The prototype was vastly dangerous because it could span through all alignments in Shareverse, whereas the final product only focuses on the Viacom alignment. When Laura found the remains of the prototype, she was eager to repair it, but Sammy was smart enough to remove all the pieces. But Laura found a workaround. Where did she place the prototype? On the T-3000 himself. Once Laura revealed this fact, his lower half was blown open to reveal the prototype. His modern technology was more than enough to power the prototype and create a rift in the sky. Both him and Laura flew into it and planned on going to an alternate timeline where they won the war and brought the resources to the main timeline. With their limited resources, Sammy asked Carmilla if she could hurl him into the rift and stop Laura. Once inside, he desperately looked for her, only to encounter John again. He then kicked him away to an ether flow within the rift and it finally destroyed him. Once finding Laura, he made it his goal to prevent Laura from entering any timeline by pushing them away from her, or even altering them to say that the humans won. But because Laura was already dead, Sammy couldn't kill her, and thus, using the ether flow, he binds Laura into the Time Hole's rift, preventing her from ever leaving. He then flew back to his timeline as the rift was slowly closing. But with the destruction of the prototype inside of the rift, it caused a great disturbance within all timelines. Sammy fell to the ground just in time, and with a thumbs up, the war had ended. Shortly after, everybody returned to their business. Sammy continues to work for Skynet, and he says that Judgment Day will launch whenever he feels like it. But there were some differences that many people had to adjust to. I'll go over some of the notable ones from minor to major. So, first off, Unfriended, the movie adaptation of Laura's killings, was released in 2014, which is bizarre because I know for a fact I saw it in theaters in 2015, but hey, time hole shenanigans. New Disney was planning to release a film for 2015 called Inside Out, but after the war, they realized that it was now being made by Pixar. So, Neo Disney didn't have an animated film to release in 2015, unless you count Frozen Fever, but because that's a short, I don't count it. I guess that's why in 2016 they released 2 movies. On the other side of the galaxy, Rosalina was going full force on her plan to become the Astral Soul Goddess of Nintendo, but due to the time hole disruption, her mentality altered, now having the addition of being boy crazy to the teenage girl thoughts that she now had, and she found the perfect guy to go after. Why me? But now, things get really dark. So, going back to Inside Out, it was going to be an adaptation of a random Minnesotan girl named Riley and her emotions. Don't ask me how the Disney alignment can see everyone's emotions. I guess it's one of the many mysteries of the mystical BS that resides in that alignment. I talked about it earlier in other videos. The interesting thing is that she is the only character in the film to have male emotions despite being female. I know it's because main character bias, but I also added in Shareverse that when she was an infant in the 2000s, she needed extreme brain surgery, and surgeons implanted other pieces of other infants' brains onto her, hence the differences in emotions, both appearance and gender. However, because of the time hole antics, the brain was missing, and Riley died before she could even live. Where did that brain go? In the T-3000's memory banks. In other words, John Connor inadvertently killed a baby. But this wouldn't be the only victim from his hands. When Carmilla returned home from the war to see Charles, she found his crib missing. She frantically asked Simon where Charles was, to which he replied, "Kid? We don't have a kid." And almost on cue, Carmilla's memories of having a child were wiped away, even asking why they bought all this baby stuff in the first place. This was Laura's fuck you moment to Carmilla. She'll never be able to experience the joys of being a mother, because Charles Kernstein Belmont never existed. But even the tragedy of two infants never growing up to witness life, there is light at the end of the tunnel. When Sammy fell from the rift in the final battle, another object also fell as well. A naked, human-sized doll with white hair was dropped unconsciously. Carmilla ordered the subchoral alignment to take the doll to a nearby hospital because, believe it or not, it had a pulse. And next time, I will be discussing the storyline regarding the doll and where she came from. The Skypenet War is pretty much the thesis of 2015 in Shareverse. Happened smack dab in the middle of the year, and features many astral souls from all 6 alignments, some of whom I've already made videos about in the past. If you want to see how Rosalina became the astral goddess of Nintendo, made a video on that. You want to see the feud between original Disney and Neo Disney, made a video on that. You want to see Melina's Shining Ray form and how Edward became the leader of Coral Knights, made videos on that too. But what is Plain Doll doing here, you may ask? Tune in next time to see how that plays out. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. With that, I'm AJ, and I'll see you all in the next one.